This is Robot Tank by Activision for the Atari 2600, a game that's very similar to another game on the Atari 2600. That would be Battlezone, but they're not the same. Battlezone and Robot Tank are very different, but they're also very similar, and we'll take a look at that, and you decide which game you like better. As you might expect from Activision, Robot Tank looks excellent on the Atari 2600. The graphics are solid, there's nice detail in the backgrounds, it changes from day to night, the weather conditions change from clear sunny skies to snow to rain, the colors are vibrant and sharp, and I like the sunset that they put into the background and the sunrise in the mornings. It reminds me of Enduro, also from Activision. At first glance, this looks a lot like Battlezone, and it would be almost identical to Battlezone were it not for a few key differences. First of all, when you fire your shots, you guide them after they leave your barrel. That may sound great in theory, that your robot tank has guided missiles. What it does is it prevents you from firing your shots to lead your opponent and hit them, and then turning. Because if you turn, your shot turns with you. So you always have to turn your shot into the opponent, and I think that gets very frustrating very quickly. You can shoot the enemy rounds out of the air. That's a nice defense. The other big difference between Robot Tank and Battlezone is that Battlezone gave you a great feeling of playing in a three-dimensional environment on the Atari 2600, which was not a normal thing for games back then. In Battlezone, the bad guys would shoot at you from behind or wherever, and you'd see the shots go flying across the front of your tank. That doesn't happen in Robot Tank. In Robot Tank, you turn suddenly so that the shots just vanish off the side of the screen. And they don't even make noises anymore. It's as if they just disappear. So basically, it's like if you're standing in front of a gigantic tank and it shoots at you with depleted uranium shells, all you'd have to do is shut your eyes. And they couldn't hurt you. Now this doesn't mean that Robot Tank is a bad game. I had this game as a kid and I loved playing it. And I liked Battlezone too. I don't think I really understood the subtle differences until many years later. And there's a few more things that separate the two games that might make you like Robot Tank more. Let's look at the bottom middle of the screen. We have the radar, and then you have four little letters there. Unlike Battlezone, your tank can take damage in this game, which makes it quite challenging because they can shoot out your visual, they can shoot out your radar, your treads, and your cannon. They can make your cannon shoot slower. So when nighttime rolls around, and it's difficult, especially when you start getting into the higher levels, it's difficult to attack the enemies at night because you can't see them until they shoot at you. And frequently it's too late to then move out of the way or turn your head and shut your eyes. Fighting in the snow is extremely difficult because your tank loses maneuverability and it's difficult to aim and hit your opponents. I found that half the time what I would do is, you can see on the top of the screen it's giving you the time of day, and it goes through a fictional 24-hour cycle, sped up obviously. So what I found myself doing is that about midnight I would end up facing away from my enemy so they wouldn't shoot at me, and then wait until about 5 or 6 a.m., turn around and then attack them, and then try to blow up as many tanks as possible while it was sunlight out. Because the game doesn't really time you. Your whole objective is to blow up as many tanks as possible, and each time you destroy a wave of tanks, which is 12 tanks, you get an extra bonus robot tank. And that's it, Robot Tank. An easy game to find today. If you enjoy Battlezone, you should certainly give it a spin in your Atari 2600. I guess really you wouldn't give it a spin, seeing as how it's a game cartridge, but giving it a spin sounds a lot cooler than giving it an insert. And the name of the game is Robot Tank. What's not to like about that? Few things are cooler than robots and tanks. And I commend the designers of the game for calling it Robot Tank, because there's a whole lot of other things that you could combine robot with, like robot toaster, robot tape dispenser, robot robotic arm. And they could have gotten far more esoteric and called the game Robot Thought, Robot Feeling of Happiness, Robot Bowl of Soup. That would have been a very dull video game. Although you could advance through the levels. You could start off as like chicken noodle soup and work your way up to Italian wedding soup. And maybe the top levels like lobster bisque or something. Robot lobster bisque. Actually, if you think about it, if they called a game Robot Lobster Bisque today, it would be very bizarre and we'd all laugh at it. But if they called the game Robot Lobster Bisque back in 1982 for the Atari 2600, you'd have thought nothing of it. It would have been, some other version of Pac-Man or Space Invaders, except with a lobster and a bowl of soup. In fact, that sounds like a pretty fun game. Your tank lets you know when there's snow approaching. That's a considerate tank. And we'll watch me get mangled here for the rest of the review, because as I destroy each consecutive wave of enemy tanks, they get more difficult. One of the things I haven't mentioned yet that makes Robot Tanks stand out is that you can withstand numerous shots from the enemy. And I was playing games where I'd have my radar knocked out, my visual knocked out, and my tank treads knocked out, so all I could basically do was sit there and shoot off into the dark. And that does give you a slight feeling of hopelessness, because there's nothing you can do to repair your tank in the middle of the game. But on the other hand, if you hit something, if you can't see it or turn your tank, it does make you feel good. Until the next enemy comes out and destroys you. If only you could be a robotic lobster getting vengeance on the chef for turning you into a soup. It could be like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Angry Lobster, Robot Tank. Can't go wrong with either of these games. They're both enjoyable, and you might like Robot Tank better. Personally, I like Battlezone just a bit more than Robot Tank, and as I frequently say on Classic Game Room, what you should really do is buy them both, because they're both excellent games, they're both very affordable today, and they complement each other very well. They both involve tanks that blow things up. And that's something that we all enjoy.